right, thank you all for coming today. Welcome to this our regular meeting with Gazette Mail editors. So I think you pretty much know the drill. We'll introduce ourselves and then we'll ask you to introduce yourselves. And as you do, just give us a minute or less on why you're running, who you are and why you're running. So we'll start down here.
Welcome to the members of the 36th candidates for 36th District. I'm Kelly Merritt, the Daily Mail opinion page editor. When you look at the paper every day or on the web, it's the right side of the paper.
Thanks, Kelly, for adding that in. I'm Dawn Miller. I'm the Gazette opinion page editor.
Phil Candler, State House reporter.
And you know, Kenny back here he's filming this and we're going to include it online. We're not streaming it live, but we are going to include it with our story on the website. So everything's on the record, and we'll do some questions after you all introduce yourselves and have a nice chat, nice discussion. So we'll start here on the end.
I'm Nancy Guthrie, and I'm running for sixth term to the West Virginia House of Delegates. I love public service. I love the state. I want to see this state prosper. I think we can do better than we're doing. And that's really why I'm running. I just think that citizens in West Virginia are ready for the next chapter, and I'd like to help out with that.
I'm Andrew Robinson. I'm also a candidate in 36th. Grew up here in Kanawha County, went away to school at Morgantown, went 2 hours up the road, bachelor and master's from WVU, and I made the decision to come back to Charleston to work and live and raise my family. I have an 8-year-old son, and what I always tell people is I have an 8-year-old son. That means I have 10 years to try to figure out what's wrong with the state and try to get things moving forward so that he has a chance to stay here. And his choice isn't as hard as mine, that he doesn't have to sit after graduation and be sitting in his college apartment, dorm room, and wonder what the job is or what's the opportunity to come back home and live closer to his family. With a small child like that, you can imagine that baseball, basketball, those things keep you busy. And you don't see your friends as often. And the times I do see my friends are at two things. I see them at funerals because a lot of our friends are passing away from heroin addiction and different kind of overdoses. And I see them at going away parties. I see them, I took a job in Charlotte, I took a job in Raleigh, sometimes across the country. And you see a lot of those two events. And that's sad. I think growing up with people for that long and realizing that the only time you're going to see them is that, somebody else has fallen into overdose or fallen into addiction, or when somebody's packing up to leave to raise their family and have their career someplace else. Is sad. And I think we can do better in West Virginia, and we can be more aggressive in what we do. And that's what I look forward to doing.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Larry Elrow, and I'm an attorney, a local historian, and a gardener in Malden, West Virginia, and that is where my law office is. And my wife and I live in Malden and enjoy living there very much. It's in the eastern part of our district. We have 2 children, and they're now in Morgantown. We're empty nested now, week number 5 and counting. The reason I'm running for office is that I really believe that I and others have a duty to do what's needed for good public policy in West Virginia. And that can take many different forms, whether it's to help families and children, to create jobs, to improve our roads and our infrastructure. So there are many things that we in West Virginia need to address. We've got to help Southern West Virginia's coal economy and create a diversified economy in Southern West Virginia. The best way to do that, I think, is with federal installations in the Beckley area, a west road, a 4-lane western road going from Beckley to Route 52, 4-lane Route 52, and getting Southern West Virginia going again. Charleston is the center of the economic area that includes that area, and we've got to be very conscious about what happens there and the kind of jobs that we can create. So I look forward to serving in the legislature and helping people as best I can.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Walker Gaskins. I'm a local attorney. I live here in Charleston. I'm not originally from West Virginia. I was born in Hawaii. I came back here with my husband after law school, and after we passed the bar, he went to go work for the state. He's a public employee, and I set up my own law firm. The reason I decided to run is because think that West Virginia is a really special place. I came here and I set up my own business, and luckily we've been very, very fortunate. We just bought our first home. I think that Charleston and Kanawha County specifically is really, really important in West Virginia. I think that it's time for Kanawha County to have a very strong delegation in the legislature. I think that I possess the tenacity to be aggressive when necessary and pursue strong policy positions. But I also think that I possess the skills to be empathetic and listen to the people in my district. So that's why I'm running.
Okay, thank you.
And, come on. If y'all would just scoot over just a little bit. Right, I'll show you right there.
That's what a keyboard, yeah,
I didn't mean to switch
You okay, Kenny?
Adam, just for your benefit, I'm Kelly Merritt, Daily Mail opinion page editor.
I'm Dawn Miller. I'm the Gazette opinion page editor.
Phil Candler, State House reporter.
And so what we've done so far is we've just asked everybody to introduce themselves and just less than a minute tell us why you're running. So you're up.
That's pretty simple. My name is Adam Martin. I'm a local business owner. I actually grew up in like the Bell, Charleston area, so I love this district. I'm from this area. It's one of the reasons I'm really running. In the business owner, we do a lot of work out of state, and I travel and I see a lot of places, and no place is like home. But at the same time, you know, we do a lot more business out of state just because of the economic difference that there is. So I see a lot of changes in a lot of things, and really to me, I see a lot of growth potential in West Virginia. And I feel like that in the last few years, we've put some things in motion to get some things going, but at the same time, you know, we're still not in a good spot. We've got a lot of room for growth, and I feel like that I would be a good addition to help make some decisions for some growth in West Virginia.
Okay. Let me go first?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been asking everybody who wants to be in the legislature what to do about the budget. So we don't have to go in a certain order, but maybe a $400 million hole next year, something in that neighborhood based on current revenues and expenses. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you'd like to see the state close that gap. Hey, who wants to go first? I see Larry.
Let me first approach the subject from the standpoint of budget process.
Okay.
You know, our budget process fails this year. We consider the budget too late in the session. We don't get enough information to compare past years with current year and future year budgets. And what I would suggest is a rule change, fairly simple rule change, to change the process, requiring that there be a spreadsheet presented to all members of the legislature showing the past year budget, the current year budget, and what the governor's proposed, and what the chair of finance in the House thinks might be good suggestions as to any item of appropriation. Show that in a spreadsheet form, and then convene a committee of the whole of the House to have all the members consider and review that information. A number of people have said that we probably can just cut waste out of the budget and not raise any revenue. I personally don't believe that. I think that we're in a very difficult time, and that we need to be looking at revenue changes. And one would be, of course, the tobacco tax that was raised 65 cents on tobacco during the session. That's a possibility, that because that's a volunteer tax. You also have the same thing, the beer bottle tax, or a number of things that could be used. I'm not sure where we'll be. I think that we cannot cut our way out of the budget problem we've got. We can't use rainy day funds. That's irresponsible. Thank goodness we didn't pass the initial budget from the House, which took so much money out of the rainy day funds. Now that's available for flood use, and we just appropriated that recently. So I think that what we're going to have to do is be very realistic, and anybody who's entered a pledge that they're going to act in a certain way, a pledge not to raise taxes, a pledge whatever it might be, that the voters need to look at that and consider, you know, are people giving up the discretion? Are they giving up the duty to make rough and tough decisions? And I think that that's a big mistake, and we're going to have some difficult times. But I think that with a new technology and improvements in the economy in southern West Virginia, that we can get through and see a much better time, especially when gas and coal are able to produce more revenue streams.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir?
I think that Larry's is on the right track. We've got the path to a budget wasn't the correct process this year. We waited, we had some priorities, leadership had priorities, and we waited towards the end of the session to take it on. And when you're looking at hundreds of $1 million in the red, I think it should be a priority. The number one priority in the reason or the rule is we have to have a balanced budget, and we have to figure that out. We looked at it from a top-down aspect. We looked at, the legislature looked at different sections and say, hey, we'll take 5% here, 10% there. But as you saw with the forestry division, we're going to see essential programs cut that way. If you do want to cut, you have to be willing to do the work, to go into these different departments, sit with them and figure it out. With that said, 300, 400, 500 million, I believe I saw an article this morning that with the flood relief fundings, we're already at $84 million in the red as of August. That's 2 months into the fiscal year. If you look at that, we get to $400 or $500 million, I don't see us being able to cut ourselves back that direction. And hopefully, as Larry said, we're going to see a turnaround in the gas industry, a turnaround in the coal industry, and we're going to see some recouping of those severance taxes and different taxes. But I believe, like Larry said, that we're going to have to make tough decisions, and we're going to have to go in there and look at what our deficit is, and on day one get working on that and work with the different departments to be sure that if we choose to cut something or we choose to reduce funding, that we aren't losing essential programs that people count on to make a living in West Virginia.
Okay.
You-
Go ahead.
One of the things that I in addition to what these two fellows have just said, I would love to see this leadership team put a moratorium on all of the social issues that ate up for 2 years. That the only thing that we would deal with would be budget issues. $300 million to $400 million of a deficit is a crisis. That's not just a small thing. And there are so many different ways that we could address it. I thank God for Phil finally pointing out the obvious, that the reduction in our business taxes is really the underlying culprit for why we're facing such difficulties. I would like to see a shared sacrifice, if you will, between business and citizens, so that citizens aren't bearing the entire responsibility for any revenue increases. It really doesn't matter how we manifest that business tax. The important thing is that we need to get $300 to $400 million out of it. Businesses shouldn't be exempt. Everybody should pay it. And then we've got the whole list of other revenue measures that we can deal with, like the beverage taxes and going back to the dollar on tobacco, or online sales tax, or even that excess land tax that people have been talking about. But one of the biggest priorities that I think we ought to spend some time on this year, because it is such a problem, is to regulate and tax the pharmaceutical industry for opioids, or actually for just pharmaceuticals, so that we can begin to establish a fund and a comprehensive approach, because we're lagging behind other states, on dealing with our heroin and our drug addiction problem, but principally and primarily from pharmaceutical drugs. But if we could get this leadership team just to agree for 2 years to do nothing but let's focus on the economy, stupid, then I think we would be in so much better shape, right? Because the other stuff eats up so much time and emotion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Okay. I disagree a little bit with what Delegate Guthrie stated as far as squeezing businesses for more taxes. I don't think that you're creating a climate for growth when you're squeezing, trying to get every dime out of businesses. They're meeting payroll, they're paying workers' comp premiums. I mean, you name it, they're paying. And we know that small businesses are a huge economic force in West Virginia, specifically Pinal County. I think that the approach to the budget is two-step. I think that we are going to have to look at some sort of a comprehensive audit to determine where there's waste, and I think that everyone here would agree that there is some waste somewhere, and we can redirect those funds. And simultaneously, we probably will have to look at raising revenue. We all know that the coal industry has been affected tremendously by the downturn and the need for coal. So we're going to have to make up those shortfalls somehow. I don't know if that's going to lead into another question about specific taxes. I can go into that later. I'll hold off on that.
I would love to talk about specifics. That's a good thought.
Well,
So,
I'll let Adam
yeah,
go first,
let's-
but that's my answer, is it needs to be,
Yeah.
not just one prong approach to the budget issue.
got it. Okay.
But we all know that Delegate Rowe and Delegate Guthrie, being there, being in the action, have a fairly better handle on exactly what's going on than, the rest of us. But I'll agree, you can't save your way to wealth. You can't just make cuts and fix it, because that's just not going to happen. But like my friend Brittany called me yesterday, her daughter's birthday's tomorrow, and 2 weeks ago, Brittany moved. She took a better job. It's a better paying job. And the move, it cost her a lot of money. But her daughter's birthday is tomorrow. And she's like, I got her this and I got her this. And she's like, I didn't get her as much as I did last year. I just feel like she's not going to wake up. And I said, Brittany, you have to understand, sweetie. Like, she's going to love you the same. You just moved. You're getting a better job. It'll change. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that, when we're doing good, there are things, but when it comes right down to it, like, if I don't have the money, I don't have the money. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like we don't love you. And I don't want to be the one to tell a person, hey, we have to cut your funding to your program. I will if I have to. Like, if it's on me, I will. But you can't put other things in jeopardy. It makes it tighter. And like I said, Delegate Rowe and Delegate Guthrie have a lot better handle and understanding about what specifically is going on. But in a logical sense, there are just things that have to be done, and it's tough. And it's tough to make the decision. What programs? What this? What that? I'm not there. I can't make those decisions. I don't know what's going on. But that's the board that I would be on. And again, it's temporary because we got some things that are cooking. Industries that are turning around. We're bringing revenue back to the state, but it's not here right now.
Okay. So following up on specific things, assuming that the state needs to raise some revenue, what taxes do you think are the least objectionable, I guess?
Sorry, I have notes. I'm going to look at my notes.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, one of the first thoughts that I had about somehow increasing revenue streams was taxes on sales taxes, excuse me. I think that maybe there's some wiggle room to bump sales taxes. I think that people who spend more and buy more goods are likely inclined to pay a slightly higher tax. And if they're able to spend more money in the economy, then that's more tax revenue for the state. I'm against any type of a food tax. I think that penalizes our impoverished populations. When I remember when I first graduated from law school and Seth had his job with the state, we were so thankful for it. And we're talking barely scraping by. I hadn't passed the bar yet. And when I say we had a 1-year-old at that time, and when we're talking $50 a week for groceries, it was $50 a week for groceries and not a dime more. We just didn't have it. So I think that I understand very intimately, like, when it comes to being on a budget. So I'm really against the food tax. I think that the inventory and equipment tax should be revised. I think that probably prevents businesses from locating here. And I'll just give you an example really quickly. I recently bought a new laptop for my business, and they didn't have it in stock. And I just was, they're advertising it, but they didn't carry them in stock. I had to wait for it to be ordered. So just little things like that with the consumer. How much is the state really making off of that, and how much, how could we incentivize businesses to come here if that were no longer a law? I'll let somebody else talk. Anybody else want to jump in?
Sure, we can come back if you have more later. So taxes that you would raise or that you think could be part of the solution?
I think specific taxes would be tough for me to say. I would like to get into the budget issue. Like I said, and Larry, Delegate Rose said, we need to get in on the first day and see what our number is, see how far we are in the red, see what taxes will provide and what is the least hurtful to our residents and citizens in West Virginia, business people in West Virginia, and go that route and weigh the pros and cons to each one, and not just in the election season say, hey, I'm for this one or I'm for that one, to actually analyze and go through the process and make a logical decision on these issues, and not just off the cuff agree or disagree with the tax or sign a pledge and say you're not going to raise taxes. But I think those are issues that people were too early to make a decision in their career at the legislature, and it caused major issues for the state. And I don't want to go down that road of saying this or that when we get it on paper and we see the pros and cons of each revenue generator or anything of that sort, that we may make a different decision than I'm telling you in September of the year before.
Nancy, we heard some specifics from you. How about you, Larry?
Well, I think the tobacco tax is a good example of why we need to look at something beyond just the tax effect. Tobacco tax is a volunteer tax. At $5.50 a pack, that is about $2,000 a year for a family. And if they're 2-pack a year, then that 2-pack a day, then they would be $4,000. Now that's money that the family could use for other purposes. You could have a college fund for that much money that's being used. Also for the state, the money's going out of state to tobacco profiteers. Now, if it's correct that there was an estimate of 31,000 people would stop smoking, about 15 or 16 young people and 15 or 16,000 adult smokers. If that occurred, that 31,000, if you start multiplying by 2,000, it ends up being about $62 million that would stay in West Virginia, would go to for housing and clothing and that sort of thing. You know, so any tax that we do, we ought to look at its consequences and effects. So I contend that sort of tax is really a family benefit. It helps, and also there's all kinds of costs that go with that. The same thing can be said about beer. You know, we haven't raised the beer tax since the early 1970s. If you had a beer bottle tax, I don't have the numbers, but it would be very substantial revenue, and the consumer wouldn't feel it that much. So we need to look at the taxes from that standpoint. The food tax. The food tax really is only an imposition on the working poor. The folks who have substantial incomes don't feel the tax. People who have low incomes usually have food stamps. So what we ought to look at is the earned income tax credit as a way of offsetting any increases in the food tax. And with the amount of money that you get from, say, a 2 or 3 cent increase in the food tax, you could fund the earned income tax credit, which would be direct payments to the working poor with families. So it's those kinds of, they are complicated issues, and those are the things that we need to look at. But what we did get in the legislature the last session was it was just whether it was a tax or not. I mean, oh, it's a tax, I can't vote for it. We have to have people who are willing to look at the revenue needs of the state in a fair way, and also to look at what the effects are on families. There are huge costs for tobacco, huge costs for alcoholism that we have in our state. I'd also say that we all want to make cuts. The governor's already cut $400 million out of the standard-based budget. So there have been a number of cuts made, and so you know, it's just the rest of it's not going to be there. There's not $400 million in cuts that we can make. So we're going to be forced to look at something. But again, whatever the tax is, it's got to be something that doesn't cut jobs, but actually helps families. So any business tax increases that we do, we need to be very judicious about. Do they directly reduce wages and employees, or are they just reducing the profit that's reported in out-of-state boardrooms? You know, we need to look at the taxes and what the effect is. I agree that we shouldn't at all tax entrepreneurs or limit entrepreneurs or small businesses. They are the ones who really create the jobs for us. So there's a number of initiatives we need to take, and I completely agree with Delegate Guthrie that we need to focus and spend the time on that. And with a different budget process where we look at it earlier, we look at the spreadsheet where we see what the exact programs are and what needs to be cut, then I think that we can actually, make judicious cuts and make tax increases that benefit people and help the state. I just hate the idea that we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars that go out of state for tobacco profiteers. That money just goes out of the state and doesn't come back. We talk about maybe now we have $1.20, I can't remember the exact amount now, $1.20 on a pack of cigarettes. Well, that tax is staying here, but the rest of it is going out of state, including the money of the federal tax. So those are the kinds of things that we've got to approach and understand and figure out. So I think that we can do it. I think we can meet the budget crisis, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time.
Anybody else have anything on that subject before we move on?
Well, obviously I agree with a lot with Mr. Robinson. Like, I'm not there. You got to weigh the pros and cons and everything. But in reality, what fixes the budget is moving dollars, moving money. People spend it, people buy it. You could leave the tax where it is, and if you could increase how much was bought and sold and all that, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You could fix some of it. Now, again, that goes back to fixing industry, blah, blah, blah. What I'm getting at here is, to me, the biggest thing to look at in taxes is what would help generate that cash flow. What would entice people to spend money? You know what I mean? What if we cut it, lots of different things, but that would be my focus, is what would get people spending money? What would bring businesses in here to spend money? Create businesses here, but what would bring businesses from outside, to want to buy things here? You know what I mean? Or do things here that we could generate from their money. We all know. Taxes are from businesses when they operate here, when people spend money. Taxes come from pretty much anything that moves. But
I'm sorry.
yes, ma'am.
There's a third part of this that I think that we've been historically missing, though. And that third part, I think, is the most crucial element, which is, when you've got a business, if you're on the skids, you get two options. You cut, you raise your prices, or you create something else. And so we've got some opportunities to create new industries. If we were to pass the marijuana bill, that is an entirely different area that starts a step-down process from pharmaceutical addiction, plus it creates jobs, and it puts money into the coffers. If we were to pass something like like Virginia did, pass the hemp bill, make it legal, but the caveat would be, and then ask our development office to go out lickety-split and start recruiting companies that are going to turn that hemp into something, whether or not it's in the construction industry or the textile industry or the food industry or whatever hemp is made into, so that when it leaves here, it's not illegal anymore. Those are some of the things. We also, one of the things that we stopped doing is trying to create industries where we become a world-class, state-of-the-art industry. And I would say that the downturn in our chemical industry and also in our coal industry has given us a perfect opportunity to start a world-class research and development program for watersheds and reclamation for our land and our water. Those could be good-paying jobs, but you've got to make that kind of an investment too. So, some of the stuff is right there, and all we have to do is act. Some of it we have to invest some money in, but that's the third component to getting the economy back up and running.
May I add, I didn't include the sales tax. I believe that taxpayers are agreeable to pay for what they get. And roads, we've got to dedicate a tax revenue source to roads. We didn't do anything in 2 years for roads. The number one job killer is bad roads. I don't care about the culture. I don't care about the tax base or anything else. If you don't have good roads, no employer is going to even look at you. So we've got to have good roads. and for jobs, and also so many people are paying $200 or $300 a year to get a wheel or a tire fix. I mean, it's a direct damage that people pay. But some sort of taxing that would be dedicated to roads, and I think the sales tax, which was passed by the Senate last year, would be a logical tax for that, and it would produce about $200 million. That's not enough. We're told we need $1 billion or something, but at least we'd be starting the process of improving our roads.
Well, and not only does it have a road issue have an effect on employers, it also has an effect on the state, right? Because people file a court of claims, and then the state ends up paying for the damage to the vehicle. So absolutely there needs to be some issue resolution with funding roads and making sure that the funding remains so that we have reliable infrastructure.
But you know, the tax guys, there's a whole laundry list of the things that we could enact or pass as far as tax. The question is, what is the other side willing to do? That's where the stumbling block was. So, you know, if you're going to take a no tax pledge, knowing that the state's drowning in debt, then you're really not doing any citizen very much good. I mean, so the question then becomes for candidates, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to pass? Because they've got a whole list of things we could pass. But, you know, from business taxes to consumer taxes. Question is, how much are you willing to go out on the line to say, this is what we need to do in order to get our economy moving again and to get our budget right side up again?
Yes, Kelly?
I would like, Adam Martin touched on it, and Ms. Guthrie, you've went further. You know, we talked about taxes to raise revenue, but let's follow that theme that we just started. I want, some specific ideas, and you have given us specific to marijuana and hemp. What is the legislature's role, the House of Delegates' role in creating an environment, improving the environment here, so not just that employers from out of state want to come in and build here or invest here and create jobs, but entrepreneurs within the state create jobs.
Sorry.
I was just going to say,
I'm just
7
really
years,
excited to answer this
okay.
question.
7 or 8
Really
years ago,
excited.
the state legislature cut taxes, trying to make the state more competitive. And so obviously there was plenty of taxes at the time in order to do that, and the economy has tanked since then in the state. So whatever tax level, we need, as Mr. Markham said, we need more people generating revenue. So how can the state go about, how can the legislature help the state?
Okay, so I have this crazy idea, and the other three individuals have already heard this idea from me because I went to a community event and kind of talked about it. But I have this idea that West Virginia could be a retirement destination, and people are like, what are you talking about? But we really could. West Virginia is absolutely beautiful. People want to fish. They love everything that's outdoorsy here. There's skiing here. It's close to Columbus. It's close to Pittsburgh. It's close to DC. And we have all these mine sites where people could build on them. So I keep thinking, well, we could build communities for, elderly people or people who are nearing retirement age. But one way that the government directly impacts the ability to start those investments is through the certificate of need. Now, I don't know too much about that. I am an attorney, but I don't really know very much about that. But I think that that's a way that it directly impacts that specific idea. But that's just an example, a small example, how we could completely create an entire new industry, bring in retired people here who are going to spend their money, they're going to invest. We have a nice, stable housing market. We have a low cost of living. We have plenty to do. It's a nice, good medium. And I think it is a good location. Like, Charleston's a great location for me. We're doing a Mobius meetup. I don't know if you guys know anything about it, but we're doing a Mobius meetup on October 8th, and everybody's coming to Charleston. I mean, there's only, like 30 people coming, but still, that was the central location, and it's the first one in West Virginia, so I'm really excited about that. So I think that we need to advocate how great the location is, how special the people are, the nice stable housing market and a low cost of living, I think that that's very appealing to people, especially people who are on fixed incomes and are headed towards retirement.
I think that okay, we have two problems. One is immediate crash of revenues, and we're talking about taxes necessary to get over that bump. But what we also have to do is at the same time, we've got to be improving higher education, technology, tourism, and changing the brand that is West Virginia. Like the Boy Scouts facility is going to bring in thousands and thousands of young leaders from around the country and around the world. They're going to come to West Virginia and really like it. They're going to think that we're a wild, wonderful destination. And that's the brand that we need to do. I agree about location. It helps us in so many ways, but we've got to build and finish the roads that are necessary. We've got to get Quarter H done. We've got to finish, we've got to build a 4-lane Route 52, and we've got to have a road that leaves Beckley and goes west and connects to another 4-lane, whether it's Quarter G or all the way to Route 52. And one thing on higher education, we need to lower the cost of community college tuition. We need to get folks in to community college, because we've got to have people who can take the jobs that entrepreneurs are going to want to offer them. Technology is key. We've got to push the federal government. Washington owes us jobs. I mean, the policy in regard to the environment that has had the effect of making it difficult for the coal industry to be able to market and have long-term possibilities. That policy has cut against West Virginia's capitalist economy that has been successful for over 150 years. So Washington owes us federal installations and federal jobs. You say, what do you mean? Well, the Fingerprint Center was a startup really for the entire growth of that corridor from Clarksburg to Morgantown. It's not really WVU. It really was the Fingerprint Center. We need more installations like that in the Beckley, in the corridor from Montgomery to Beckley and Bluefield. In that area, there's a new brand, a big brand of WVU in Beckley as far as higher education that'll be attracting students from out of state. But we need to turn that into an economy of technology. It's centered right in the tourism area, between the Greenbrier and the Fayette County attractions. It really is a natural place to get people to want to locate businesses, but they're not going to be probably manufacturing businesses. They are going to be technology and other businesses. And the folks who don't have the training to be in technology and working in that will be in service industries. They'll be the ones building the buildings and putting in the air conditioning and doing so many things that are necessary. It will build a new diversified economy in Southern West Virginia. But we've got to start now. We've got to look at how do we get more people into higher education. And it's not just a training. The federal government's proposing all these training programs for coal miners. But are they going to give them a bus ticket? Because there are no jobs for what they would be trained for. So what we need is the federal government needs to make a commitment to the coal fields that they're going to put installations in, whether they're military or not. West Virginia had a higher average wage until 1950 compared to Virginia, and it was the Cold War. Professor Alexander Williams has discovered this. The Cold War funding changed and created the boom in the South, especially in the state of Virginia. And we didn't get any of those jobs. There was only one location, and it was west of the Blue Ridge, and it was the Radford Army Arsenal in Radford. That's the only Cold War installation they did into the Appalachian region. And so based on history and heritage and also what's going on now, that Washington owes us jobs. And if we can get some of those installations, then I think that we can build on those and see a new economy in West Virginia that benefits from location, the tourism, the adventure entrepreneurs, and also international entrepreneurs. I see it in the future, and I think we'll do it, but we've got to get started.
I have a long-term and short-term goal to this. I believe we're in such a situation that we have to do something immediately. However, agreeing with Delegate Rowe again, is that our education system is an opportunity for us to create opportunities for people. I believe creating opportunities in all of our conversations comes back to jobs. What we're really saying in economic development is people need jobs in West Virginia. We need jobs, and we've seen it all over, jobs. That's what we're looking for. So what I believe is a key asset that we've already developed the infrastructure for. We pay teachers, our education system is there for career and technical education. You can go and you can become a certified electrician, HVAC, a long list of things at various schools across the state. Why don't you go get your HVAC license? That way you got something to fall back on. Also, you also have a job once you get out of high school, no matter what your plan is. So we should encourage people into these things and be funding and adding different teachers, different programs, adventure entrepreneurs. There can be different ideas played into career and technical education. There's a vocational school in Ohio that they've come up with the best diesel mechanic school in the country. So for the East Coast, the only place these large diesel mechanic type businesses are advertising for job openings is in this small technical school's newspaper. So you have 100 jobs for diesel mechanics in this one newspaper because their programs become so well known that they know they're getting a well-deserving and hard-working person out of there. So why can't West Virginia have that? It doesn't have to be diesel mechanics, it can be anything. But that's a long-term goal. That will take us a few years to get developed. But what we have to do in the short term is to attract and be energetic and aggressive about businesses that want to open up, that want to move here. And if you look at other towns and other cities and other states, there's a story from an entrepreneur here in Charleston that said he went to Louisville. He was looking at a large building. He met with the owner. They checked him out that night. He came back the next day. There was a representative from the governor's office, the legislative staff, the economic development, the mayor's office of Louisville, and another state economic development rep, 5 there to meet him, to be there to tell him what the state can do for him, what the state can't do for him, and encourage him to come to their area. In West Virginia, I don't think we're that energetic. We're not that aggressive about things. And what I'd like to see is an entity at the state level that when a business is talking about opening, we have people we have staff at the state that can go do this and introduce themselves and bring the programs that past legislation has created and hand them to them. Say, hey, this one fits you. This is the program you need to follow. Here's the tax incentive that we created back in 1989 that hasn't been utilized, and we want you to take advantage of those. And we can be aggressive in that manner and attract different businesses.
You know, one of the other things, not to step on Andrew, one of the other areas that he reminded me of when he was talking, that we could do now, you know, in the short term. The gaming industry is getting ready to, there's what is it called? Is it on how do they?
Online gaming?
Online gaming. I forget what they're ready to do the next phase.
Yeah, the word that you.
Yeah, and I can't remember what I'm not a gamer,
It's
so
the online
yeah,
stuff.
but I don't know what it's called. But they're ready to do that. We should give them a green light. Rather than vilifying the gaming industry, which gave us promised scholarships and senior services and tourism and a whole bunch of money to operate on that we didn't have before, we should expand that area too. And that's something we could do in the short term. And it would bring in revenue. Sorry, I had to get that.
Okay.
Looking at the map here of the 36th House District, it's a big district. There's 3 members. We're pretty much looking at the entire southern half of Kanawha County, pretty much from west to east, and a little bit of Charleston. How do you represent a district so big? People within the city as well as out in Comfort or wherever else, and is it too big? How many districts should there be in the House of Delegates?
It is a large district. I've noticed that it's incredibly diverse. I think my approach, anyway, has been to go door to door, talking to people, trying to figure out what their concerns are, trying to figure out how I can address their concerns, formulate policy that will help the people in the district. And also meeting with local officials, like we go to Glasgow and Pratt, and we talk to people who, are all along the river communities, and just reaching out to them to see what's important to them. What can we do to help them stay, above the water, so to speak. They're in a huge transition period. So that's my approach, is just getting out there and hit the ground running and talking to people. Just knowing what people in my district are saying.
What I was going to say, in accordance to the size of it, it's gigantic. I used to joke, because I had to go to sometimes you got to go to 2 meet the candidates from here to there, and I'm like, I got to call Captain Curran and get me there in time, you know what I'm saying? But, I'm sure it's difficult. What I find, Brad's not here, but what I find interesting is the amount of people that I run into that's like, oh yeah, I had this problem, I called Brad, and I'm like, geez, people from everywhere have called Brad, and because that's the kind of candidate I want to be. I want to be able to communicate and figure out and actually be your delegate, be your voice, and try and help communicate what we need, blah, blah, blah. But so to handle a district that's so large, apparently it's feasible. I'm sure Delegate Rowe and Delegate Guthrie deal with it as well. But I would say, they should be smaller. But again, I've handled it. I could only assume that smaller districts would mean that you could maybe better communicate with some others. But at the same time, when you have 3 delegates, you have 3 different points of view who can push for what you need. You know what I'm saying? You can have people who are focused on different things. Like, Brad's not focused on the same things that Delegate Rowe are, and Delegate Rowe's not focused on the same thing that Delegate Guthrie are. Does that make sense? So there are pros and cons to both. At one point I was like, let's just divide it all up to 100. You know what I'm saying? But when it really comes down to it, it's, are you effectively representing your area? And I think that's what's most important. Can you communicate what your area, what your district needs you to do? Can you be there for your district? To me, is that the question you're asking, Kelly?
Yeah, pretty much. But before we go to the 2 incumbents who have experience with that, Andrew, if you would just touch on it.
I've actually had a lot of fun in my last couple months traveling the district and trying to figure out where district lines go and that kind of thing. And I think we had an interesting event this summer trying to figure out who really knew where the lines were, because I don't know anybody who really knew. That said, we have a diverse area. We have the city of Charleston, we have Canal City, we have the city of Charleston, we have the west side, we have Allen Creek, we have small towns up and down the river. It's diverse, but what you find when you travel these areas is they're facing similar issues. Jobs, dilapidated housing, drug epidemic are the 3 major things that people say. You go to city council events, I've been to all of them in the last year. They say the same thing. They're trying to figure out abandoned housing. They're trying to figure out drug epidemic. They're trying to figure out where the money is going to come from because people are leaving. I mean, it gets back to the fact that 75% of college graduates leave West Virginia. 65% of high school graduates leave West Virginia. So if the flooding of your youth is going away and the people that create businesses, you're 25 to 45, they're creating businesses, they're there. If they've left, what happens when there's a major downturn? When the Walker machinery plant closes that employed people for 20, 30 years, what happens? We're seeing it right now. We have to find a way to fill that void. But getting back to the question, I was getting off on a tangent. But you see similar issues up and down the river, and you can find common ground on those things because you can help solve those issues. And I think you can be, no matter where the lines are drawn, you can be effective no matter where I believe I can be effective no matter where you drop me, because I think we face similar problems. So the experience.
Well, I think one of the things that's telling is that when you have a single member district, the turnover is almost 0. I mean, they're there forever. They become potentates. Now, that said, in Kanawha County, if you had taken the map, on paper, it makes sense because it's just sort of the bottom half of the county. It makes no sense in terms of the population areas whatsoever. Kanawha County should be divided horizontal, it should be divided vertically instead of horizontally. Then you start seeing areas that are more, have more in common. The east end of Kanawha County has a lot of interests that are just general to Kanawha County. But to have Tornado in our district, in other words, in the district right next to Montgomery, have Tornado, Allen Creek, and those folks, you really have to question why they're not in with St. Albans, South Charleston, and so on. And it was a gerrymandering. That was what happened, but the incumbents then gerrymandered, and South Hills, the district lines just go all over the place. 1,300 voters were voting in the wrong, either in the wrong districts or on the wrong ballots last time. And I'm proud to say that my son and his friend were the ones that discovered that our district is actually was in the wrong senatorial district for 2 elections. You know, so but the key is, as these folks have said, it's the interest that you represent. To take a county like Kanawha, now it's unwieldy to have, 12 or 13 delegates in one district, I realize that. But really, all of us in Kanawha have to represent really all of Kanawha County. And I think that the interests are clearly, they are diverse from area to area, but most folks are together. And I think it would, at this point, be arbitrary to reduce the number of delegates in the 35th, which has 4, or the 36 down below 3, unless we did it looking at specific population areas. And I think if you look at it vertically, then it starts to make more sense. So, but if folks who do it gerrymander, you're going to just have the same situation. But I really would caution against single-member districts. I mean, when you look across the state, there's no competition, and they're there forever.
And we are back online, so Ms. Guthrie.
One of the, I think everybody brought it up in their own little way, and when you finally get elected, if you're lucky enough to get elected, one of the things that you do or you find that's very easy is to represent the people that elected you. It's like, for instance, like Brad and I have worked on projects together because it's in the interest of the people we serve. Larry and I, maybe the first year that Larry was up there, because of the abandoned housing issue, one of the very first pieces of legislation we crafted along with Brad was to try to begin to address that. So, it may seem unwieldy, but really, compared to some of the other districts that some of these folks have to cover, there's one guy that I think he's like in 6 different counties to cover his folks, So, we're kind of like small potatoes, I think, as far as on the complaint-o-meter.
And compared to Senate districts,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But
Senate districts just go.
People will call. If they call Brad, or Brad will call me and say, hey, we got a problem. You want to try to help out with this, and then we double team it. So it's that part of actually doing your job doesn't have very much to do with partisan politics. That just has to do with doing stuff for folks that ask you to do stuff that needs to be done. So
Interesting. This year, we have 2 from the east end of the county, and for a number of years, all the representation was from the city of Charleston. So this time we have 2 folks who are from the east end outside of Charleston.
Well, Delegate Guthrie, you anticipated me when you brought up marijuana a while ago, because I've been asking everybody, I'm sure everybody here is tired of hearing it, but I'd like to hear from everybody who's running for the legislature, just where you are on the question, on the topic of marijuana and hemp. There are all different ways to think about it. Some people want to legalize it for medicinal reasons, but not for recreational use. So I would love to hear from every one of you where you are on the question of legalizing marijuana, and you could throw in hemp separately since it's a separate thing. And who would like to go first? Yes, sir.
I was listening to the radio this morning, and Justice Neely was on there, and he said $150 million is something we could see to come into the state. Along with that, he estimated a 4 times multiplier of the $150 million in excess jobs and secondary employment from that industry.
This from recreational marijuana use?
I didn't follow if he was moving too quick for me. It's medicinal and back and forth. My personal opinion is we should be careful with recreational because of federal law. The story I always tell is that in Boulder, Colorado, a truck with $150,000 just circling the building because you can't deposit your cash in banks is one thing. But when we go to Campbell's Creek or other areas, we may have some different kind of cowboys in West Virginia. That $150,000 in cash driving around town may not be legitimate. So what I'd like to see is passing of medicinal, and within that legislation, a stepstone to legalizing recreational, because we've got to look at different industries on the East Coast. I mean, the truth be told, that we jumped ahead in casinos. We had a few years of the golden years, and then it fell off, which with any new entity, if we're successful, the surrounding states are going to copy. But with that said, I would be for medicinal currently, and when Colorado or some other states straighten out some of the federal liabilities, I'd be all for moving towards recreational.
Who wants to go next? Yes, sir.
Okay, yes on industrial hemp, absolutely, it's a good agricultural product, no question. Yes on medical marijuana, we need it. I think it's an alternative to opioid use and to painkillers. People need it. It ought to be something that a doctor can prescribe. That's a controlled, in a controlled environment. I think it just makes sense. Recreational marijuana, I'm going to have to be convinced on that one. I'm not ready for recreational marijuana. I think that there's a real generation difference about this, but let me say a couple things. We have to stop criminalizing marijuana. And you say, wait, well, is that legalizing? No, I'm not. There is a difference there. We've got to stop raising the criminal penalties for the sale and use of marijuana. The police activity in regard to marijuana is really a lot of wasted time. I'm really concerned that there is a push to just, as a way of dealing with the drug problem, just to build more prisons and increase minimum penalties so that people are in prison forever. I just don't think that that's the way we should go. In terms of tourism and whether it would help us or hurt us as a brand in eastern United States, I mean, our location again would be a real plus, just as Andrew had said. But let me say this, that I'm looking now at the industries. We have a monopoly that's given to intoxicating liquors and beer and wine and alcohol. We give that monopoly, it's free, it's legal, people can get as drunk as they want, they're penalized if they drive. We have that industry, and then we have the marijuana industry that's starting to grow up in Colorado, and we've excluded them. And I'm interested in knowing statistics in Colorado about what the effect is whenever you introduce marijuana against the alcohol industry. And, you know, I really have to question if you sort of didn't have any history about this, if you just came in and had no knowledge, why somebody would say, well, why do you have an alcohol industry that you protect and encourage, have low taxes, you make sure you have brunch bills so people can drink in the mornings on Sundays, you know, and you've got a marijuana industry that really has the same effect. It's not addictive, it creates situations where people shouldn't drive, but you know, why is it that we exclude that industry? So I think those are the kind of questions that we're going to have to confront in regard to marijuana. I don't think it's easy, and I think that there are a lot of folks who are really going to have trouble with it. I really don't, let me say this too, I don't want to see, you know, a marijuana store on every corner. And I think they saw that even in the states that have medical marijuana. There's got to be some reasonable regulation of medical marijuana. And hopefully it would be through pharmacies. But I think we're ready for that. I think we need it. Cancer patients deserve it. We should be there on medical marijuana. So I'll be an advocate for that. Recreational marijuana is tougher. I think we need to look at it very carefully, and probably, as I think Andrew said, it would be a step in the process. Let's agree to the medical marijuana, and then we'll look at the other.
Just to add on to Delegate Rowe, they show a 25% decline in opioid overdoses with the introduction of medical marijuana.
Sure. All right, so I was taught a long time ago, you know, not to make decisions based upon the dollar bill, but make decisions based upon the merit of that decision. I get a lot of people telling me that, again, $150 million, you could have $150 million to just legalize this stuff. Not that simple, you know what I'm saying? It's just not. Now, I agree with Delegate Rowe on a lot of things. Hemp, let's roll it. Medical use marijuana. I've read some stuff recently that was very, very interesting. You know, I have recreational. I'm I'll get to that in a second. Medical use marijuana, I read some stuff recently that talked about how, you know, there are better ways to administer it other than just approving marijuana. That there are ways that I guess they pull the substance out of the marijuana that affects it, and doctors can specifically administer the doses of the things that are needed instead of just prescribing marijuana. Does that make sense? So that was interesting. Wasn't sold on it. Pretty sold on medical use marijuana, but you know, I don't have to make a decision tomorrow, do I? All right. So, but as far as recreational use marijuana, you know, I'm really not sold on it. You know, we do. I mean, you do have alcohol over here, and alcohol is legal within these limits and things like that. And you know, people say that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol. How many people die from marijuana? Just leave me alone. All right, but you know, it is. It's a choice of where do we want to go from here. You know what I mean? You know, kids. You know, I work with a lot of kids. Anything you tell a kid, that's what it is. But when you make something a law, you've just distinguished between right and wrong. And I'm not saying right and wrong as in marijuana is wrong and bad and, you know, a sin or whatever like that. And what I'm trying to say is that there are sometimes when you legalize something like that, sometimes people aren't as responsible as other people. They don't understand the responsibilities that come with doing things. Does that make sense? And it sometimes takes down people's values of understanding. And it's hard. Again, I don't have to make a decision tomorrow on that. And does that mean that I would vote against any bill that came up? Nah. Again, you have to depend on the bill, and I have to look into it. But hemp, let's go. Medical use marijuana. Like if I had to vote tomorrow, I'd research all night. Recreational use, if I had to vote tomorrow, I'd be like, I got time for this right now.
There are some really interesting developments within the field of medical marijuana. I think that it's one of the last great frontiers for entrepreneurs and people who work for themselves and who are scientists, because they're leading the way when it comes to development of these medicines. So you have normal, everyday people, if you want to call them that, developing technologies and ways to take the THC, I think that's the right term, you'll have to excuse me, I'm not extremely well versed on the verbiage, out of the marijuana so that it really is medicine and it helps, you know, whoever is taking it. So I think that legalizing medical marijuana could be a really great industry for the state. But, you know, when I was in law school in Michigan, we saw when they legalized it, there were little stores popping up left and right. So I think that there is something to legislating, you know, how many dispensaries there can be and that sort of thing. But also this, you know, it would be up to the cities to zone appropriately so that they're not in every corner. When it comes to, so I do support the medical marijuana, I'll make that clear. And when it comes to the recreational marijuana, initially I had a lot of reservations because it's a gateway drug and we don't want to send, you know, the wrong message to children in a state that has an epidemic of, you know, illicit substance abuse. There recently, I believe, were, I think it was in Spain or Portugal, I can't remember exactly where they actually legalized drug use and they saw a dramatic reduction in use. So I go home and I look at my kids and I say, do I want them, you know, taking pain pills and then possibly leading into heroin? Or do I want to let them smoke a joint? I mean, I would never let them do that. That's, you know, the wrong way to say it. But absolutely, I would prefer marijuana as opposed to the others. I think that if there were legitimate efforts to study legalization of recreational marijuana, I would really strongly consider it. Absolutely. I think it could possibly have a tremendous financial impact on the state. It has the possibility of becoming an industry leader in developing new technologies. And again, it gives us a competitive edge. So I think it's worth looking at.
Thank you. Anything you want to add on the subject?
Just that, you know, I've spent a lot of time talking to some vets about this issue, and one of the things that they get so tired of is the just repetition of pharmaceuticals that people have got them on for PTSD and you know, so-called chronic pain management, and their whole, in addition to cancer patients and anybody else that would need it, their thing is, look, I would like to be able to smoke a joint as opposed to taking 8 pills, because it takes the edge off. And it's like, if you can make somebody that less dependent on a pharmaceutical drug, just by virtue of the fact that you enact a policy, then yeah, I'm for that. Now, as far as, I'm sort of with Larry and Andrew on that, and you know, I don't know about the recreational. Maybe we just go walk. You got to walk before you can run. You know, and let's try something. Let's try one thing first. It's encouraging to know that Chelsea is in favor of that as well. The other thing I would point out too is that I know that some of the blowback will be is that it's a gateway drug, but it's not. A gateway drug is the whole host of pharmaceuticals that people, I read a study that said that you would have to, in order to get addicted to marijuana, you would have to smoke 238 joints an hour, every hour that you're awake, 24 hours a day.
That would be a drug use problem.
I know, so anyhow, the answer is yes.
All right. Phil, is there anything you need before we wrap up?
I would probably be remiss, given the recent news, not to ask Chelsea about her husband's involvement in your campaign allegedly while on public time. Care to comment on that whole situation?
I don't think that my comment would add anything meaningful. I don't think that my comment would add anything substantive to my race or to the other candidates. But I can assure you that there is absolutely nothing scandalous or nefarious going on with either my campaign or my husband's employment.
Anything else, Phil?
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you all very much for coming. Good discussion.
Thank you, good.